Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Laura with Connect My Brain. We are so glad that you're joining us today. And I think we have a very special topic. I've definitely, in many podcasts, have talked about developmental trauma, developmental delay. But I have a guest here today, so I'm very excited about that. I love to have people on the show. And our guest is actually Emily Harris, and she works at Connect My Brain. But she's also pursuing her degree in biology. Then she's off to chiropractic school. And then, if God has that in stored for us, we hope that she just continues on with us. But, we don't have to put any pressure on anybody. But her class was talking about an article, and the title of that article is Developmental Trajectories of Early Life Stress and Trauma. And we really had a good conversation. And in fact, I'm going to go discuss with her class like a real life case because it seemed to be new information to this body of people studying biology. So, Emily, welcome to my podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
We're so glad that you're here. And so, what I'd like to do is kind of turn it over to you and you talk about this article and what you all got out of it and where you were kind of feeling are these guys like are they living under a rock? This stuff
hmm
is going on all the time.
hmm
But why don't you share with our podcast audience your perspective?
This was a pretty lengthy article if you look it up. It's really a review of other studies that have been made. So, there's a lot that it talks about, but the main goal is to really see the effects biologically on the body from childhood trauma. And so, I love this article. I'm very biased. I work at Connect My Brain. So this is kind of up my alley. I'm really interested in this kind of thing. And I mean, for many years, you look up books and you start doing your own research on how things affect the body, like food, stress, and this was something that I knew. I knew from my fiance having celiac disease, and I did a lot of research on that to help him. And so I already knew the connection between brain and gut. And obviously, coming into the office, I'm like, yes, this is where I'm at. And I mean, this is updated information, obviously, to me and Dr. Hansen, but we're in this classroom and we get to how it affects the gut, and my professor's like, oh my gosh, I never knew. And remind you, my professor, she teaches anatomy physiology 2, and animal physiology. So she's really into physiology of the body. So we learn all the functions of the body, the kidney, the brain, the heart. And right now we're on a special topics class, which is more advanced physiology. And so my professor's sitting here and she's saying, I had no idea that there was a connection between
Hmm.
brain and gut. And I was shocked because if you really do your own research, it's really not hard to find the studies that have already been done between brain and gut. And so I turned to her and I said, Dr. Whiting, this is what we do. Like, this is what my office does. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I can't believe you don't know. And because she was saying, maybe there's some medication that we can start doing because her dad is a cardiologist. So she was thinking medication, and she knows where I'm at with holistic and the non preventative and non invasive area of where I'm thinking. And so I was like, Dr. Hansen, or Dr. Whiting, we do this. I'm like, we change these kids' diets and we watch their behavior. We watch the results in the office get so much better, just diet alone. And then obviously we do neurofeedback as well. But I mean, these kids come in, they're doing neurofeedback, but I can tell when they've changed their diet and
Yeah.
without me really knowing. because it makes such a huge impact. And so I came to Dr. Hansen and I was like, Dr. Hansen, my professor does not know about any of this. And it really shows how much in the education system that people don't really know the updated research on the effects of gut and brain. And so this article really laid it out for us. And so, yeah, that's basically what happened. So that was the
Well,
conversation.
it is really interesting because on the Geome project, there, which was decades ago, they went after looking at how many genes a human being has and what kind of pharmaceuticals could they create based on any kind of genetic mutation. Okay. And what they found was we don't have any more genes than an inchworm. So
Mhm.
this isn't like, the Wells Fargo cargo going in the gene department for the pharmaceutical industry. And one of my favorite people who was actually on that project is Dr. Bruce Lipton. And his encouragement has been to the educational system, it's time to update the textbook because they're still teaching a very old model.
Absolutely.
And they're teaching that if you remove the nucleus from the cell dies. And what they actually found on that project, the cell did not die immediately. So that's just information inside that nucleus. It's the powerhouse of the cell that really can integrate with the body and make very serious changes. So it's really time to let's get with some current information,
Yes.
you know. But this also ties back to research in the typical model of research. They only want like a double-blind placebo trial,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, those take a lot of money, time to create. And so I can remember, I'm in 28, 29 years of this stuff, and the case study has always kind of been thought of as less than powerful. And really, it's the case study over the years that's been accumulating that then you can do a study that looks at a lot of different research and look at those conclusions. So I find a lot of it very interesting. Let's kind of we get the gut brain axis, and here at Connect My Brain, yes, what we do is we have a 3-tier approach, mechanical, chemical, brain. And I tell every single parent, I can be really good at all these therapies, but if you don't have the right chemistry, it just does not stick. You have to change the chemistry. So we can always do more talk about that. But in this article, what it was relating to, in addition to the gut, was the development of the child being impacted by early life stress. And the words are they're very serious words, like maltreatment, neglect, separation, um, parental loss, extreme poverty, starvation, domestic, school, community violence, and other types of even physical trauma. How was that handled in your class?
So honestly, I feel like trauma's really not talked about enough.
Mm,
Because I feel like at a certain level, everyone deals with a certain amount of trauma in their life.
yeah, yeah.
And it really wasn't a sensitive subject, because I'm sure everyone in that room was dealing with their own stuff.
Mm,
And if you come into a school, especially in the science building with chemistry and biology majors, whether they have no stress or trauma at home, they have trauma from school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
just the amount of stress that students are in, I've been doing neurofeedback and biofeedback at the office, and I have learned how to regulate my body. I've learned how to cope with the stress that I'm given and still be okay and not affect my body. And I'm watching my body heal even in the moment of stress. Um,
How was your body impacted by stress?
Rashes, headaches, ringing of the ears, dizziness. My body was very, very much affected by stress
Wow.
beforehand.
Hmm.
And I've changed my environment. I'm getting therapy and things like that have all together well-roundedly helped me. And coming back to school, I'm watching how many people do not know how to handle nor regulate their bodies during a stressful state. And it doesn't stop after school.
No.
School is just the
That's the whole
beginning.
thing. It's like a freight train that has literally lost control. And just
Yes.
because you had a break doesn't mean that you got regulated.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And some may resonate with, when you go take a vacation and you still feel your heart pumping out of your chest. While there's no stress around, but your body is still so much stress because I mean that's a perfect example of your body not regulating
Right.
even when you leave the stress. Your body doesn't
Well,
know
and
how.
it's also habituation. Like the
Mhm.
more that you do it, you go from periods of stress that everybody needs a little stress. You got to exercise
Mhm.
that. But if it doesn't know how to turn off, then it becomes chronic. And once it
Exactly.
becomes chronic, your brain actually thinks this is your normal state now.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I wanted to also kind of go into, while these are really dramatic things that happen, that it's very easy for us to understand that there is trauma. But, working with kids for 28 years, I can tell you there are so many children that are going through incredible amounts of what I would term trauma when they have not developed correctly. And the list is so long as to what impacts that. But when these kids are not accepted by peers, when they're constantly getting in trouble, when they're constantly being called out, and nobody's taking the time to actually look at what's going on for them, that's very traumatic. I am watching right now a little person. The school is pushing medication almost on a daily basis to this family. And we kind of took a sidebar note and really got his eyes evaluated. And what came back was quite alarming. And I'm actually going to write the school a letter because they need to stop the push, because they can't make the connection between paying attention or getting something done quickly according to what they think should happen. And what's happening to this child is he's beginning to just absolutely dislike school. Now, that is a traumatic event for a
Mhm.
child,
Right.
right? And there's so many reasons why children have problems paying attention. It is not because there's a lack of stimulant medication in their body that's keeping them from paying attention. You have to look at the wiring,
Mhm.
and we've got to start to realize how important it is to not just jump to a medication, because these too have very long term impacts on the brain, especially when it's in open windows of development. And then, like you're talking about with the stress, well, what's the physiological effect of stress? What happens to the body when a person's in stress?
A lot.
Do you know the particulars?
Not necessarily. I feel like
Okay,
there's a
that's
full
fair.
list.
That's
Yeah.
fair. So you'll have a jump of on chiropractic school, and you'll probably now make a lot of new connections.
Mm-hmm.
But the gut brain axis is the adrenals
Mm-hmm.
firing up
Yep. That cortisol.
to the hypothalamic
Mm-hmm.
pituitary junction in the brain and saying there is a threat.
Yep.
And the minute that alarm goes off, you now switch blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
And blood flow goes to the periphery.
Yep.
It bypasses the gut because there's no need to digest, eliminate, or reproduce during a threatful event. And then it also shifts the blood from the front of the brain to the back of the brain. So now we lose executive function. Now imagine what that is like if that's the chronic state of your body.
Right.
What's going to happen if I don't have proper blood flow to my gut?
Yep.
You're
And
going to go ahead.
and also like what you said before was it is important to have a small amount of stress and still have some
Mm-hmm.
stress.
Mm-hmm.
And before it comes chronic, I mean, even your immune system turns on in your short-term stress, which is good. But then when you turn into long-term chronic stress, that's when autoimmune diseases start to occur because that immune system is still running. It's revved up.
Yes, that's such a good part. I'm so glad you brought that up because that I'd like to underline that and put some quotes around it because this is the important part. And if you constantly keep something on, you're changing the switch.
Mm-hmm.
And it even happens in the brain. And that is another thing that we're actually seeing a ton of is these kids and adults as well, they're not being able to kill off viruses and bacteria,
Yep.
which are
And
leading to autoimmune storms.
yes, and that was another thing my professor did not catch on because we're talking about children here in this article, and they were talking about physical trauma and neglect and all the things external, but I had to bring her to a place where she could also think about what a child goes through already with viruses, with strep, like things like that in the beginning of their life that already stress them out, even if they have a good environment around them.
Yes,
Um,
excellent point.
yes.
And strep is actually considered, oh yeah, it's very common. Well, now we know that that's attached to an autoimmune problem that the acronym is called PANDAS and PANS. PANS is typically looking at maybe some other viruses and bacteria over strep, but strep has some features that mimic typical bacteria in the human body. And so when you chase it with an antibiotic, it mutates very quickly. And before you know it, it's got its own ecosystem going on in your body.
Yep.
And they're relating this to, I'm not crazy about this term, but behavior changes. Okay. So meaning that the child is acting differently. And there's lots of reasons for that as well. But they have actually put a label to that where obsessive compulsive behaviors, they don't like to put the big D at the end for disorder because it's characteristic that those behaviors come on after a period of some type of infection or some type, now I'm even seeing it, of just immune stress. For example, kids have been going to these booster runs and they do this rainbow stuff. I have no idea what it is that they use, but it's colored and they're throwing them at they're throwing the
Oh, wow.
colors at them and turning them into, just a like a mosaic of color.
Mhm.
And for a child, of course, that is fun. However, when you're a child that's sensitive,
Mhm.
and regardless if you're sensitive or not, anything on your skin for 20 minutes is now in your bloodstream.
Yep.
So a child that's already struggling with a dysregulated immune system, more because of chronicity, now they really can't even tolerate their
Mhm.
fun environment.
Yep. And
Yeah.
that
So,
goes with pools too, with
yes.
chlorine.
Oh, very good point. Very
Yep.
good point.
And this article talks about they saw a different bacteria taxa in the stomach with patients that, and they were testing older people. These were adults that they were looking at, patients that had PTSD. Their
Mm,
bacterial taxa in their stomach was different than the one that was exposed to trauma as a control, but didn't have
uh-huh.
PTSD. So I think they both exposed them to a stressful state, and the bacterial taxa was different in the ones that already had PTSD.
Wow.
Yes, and that goes with that's affecting the permeability of your stomach and your intestines, and that's what basically is called leaky gut, which
Yes.
a lot of people have.
I want to look up real quick because why is that important? Why is talking about
Hmm.
the bacteria, why is that so important? I wanted to, I don't have this in my head right now. Um, let's see. There's so many bacteria in the body. I'm not going to be able to find a number really quickly, but more than 50 different species of lactobacillus is included. And then more than 30 different strains of bifidobacteria.
Yeah.
And so this is even, I don't want to like take the time to read this, but it's even now going into streptococcus
Hmm.
thermophilus in this same article. And that's that idea that some strep mimics the human body, right?
Hmm.
But we've got thousands upon hundreds of thousands of good bacteria in our body. And what she's referring to is that if this becomes dysregulated, meaning maybe you've already heard of the term biofilms, but those are normal, but they can become pathological.
Yep.
And so we're creating ecosystems in our body based on what's going on in the gut.
Yep.
And those environments can be positive or negative.
Hmm.
On a negative level, a biofilm is creating a wall, a very thick wall that's pulling in all of the bad bacteria, heavy metals, prescriptive breakdowns that you're taking, and it's building a system. And then yeast, parasites, those are in there too. And then they're mutating. And then it runs a cycle. And then about every 3 to 4 weeks, it literally opens up and dumps back into the body. And the hamster wheel just keeps on going. And this is why, from the very beginning of this conversation, Emily was saying, we see tremendous changes if somebody really does change the gut.
Yep. And this
You know,
article even talks about what the gut influences. So it was
go ahead.
saying that it influences the communication for immune system, like we were saying, the central nervous system, your stress response, your metabolism. I mean, and I'm sure there's so much more than that.
Well, neurotransmitters. What's neurotransmitters?
Yes.
That's a big one.
Yeah, yeah, neurotransmitters. That is, it's very similar to signals like hormones, but they just travel differently. So the hormones travel through blood, and neurotransmitters travel through your neurons. And so, for an example, your adrenal gland, it releases norepinephrine. That's a neurotransmitter. And that norepinephrine regulates things like we were talking about, the immune system, and then it targets other organs like your bones and your muscles, and if it's going to break down glucose, and it's going to, or it's going to build up glucose. And you need that fast glucose when you're stressed, but when it's long term, that's when it becomes dangerous. And so those neurotransmitters also have an impact there. And just many other body processes of just signaling something to occur, basically to allow a cellular response to occur, like cortisol to be released.
What are the big ones in the brain?
Big ones in the brain.
You didn't think I'd put you on the
I
spot, did
know.
you?
um, we
One begins with D and one begins with G and
oh, dopamine,
dopamine is one, serotonin,
glutamate. Is it glutamate?
glutamate, that's
Okay.
right. And
Yep.
another big one is GABA, right?
Yep.
Those are all neurotransmitters
Yep.
for your brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you take the same thing that you're saying, and it's targeting the neurons in the brain, which is going to make you feel like you are at peace, that you have reward, you see where you're going. The inhibitory effect of GABA, the excitatory effect of glutamate. I mean, this is the chemistry of the brain, and we're saying the gut is influencing that outcome as well, right?
Yep.
So, and I like how you touched on leaky gut. So what is leaky gut? Do you know how to describe leaky gut?
As far as I know, you have microvilli that covers
Yes.
your flora in your intestines. And so when you have inflammation, when you're taking medication, even ibuprofen can do this. You're eating preservatives, oils, I mean, just all the bad stuff.
Hmm.
It can cause like an opening
Yeah.
through the gut. And so when you open that, all your blood travels waste to your kidneys to filter. And so when you open those, you're allowing all that waste to go in your stomach back into it. And so you're creating this storm for a lot of things to occur. Like we said, like many different things with the communication between your immune system, your central nervous system, your stress response, your metabolism. And so you're alternating all of those things when you have a leaky gut. And
Yeah.
even you're not even absorbing what you need,
That's right.
because your body is so focused on trying to fix the leaky gut, it's not focused on absorbing what you need. And then
And then
you can
that's
take,
going to lead to micronutrient
yep,
deficiencies because you're not going to get what you think you're getting from your food.
exactly.
And they
And
also tie it back. Leaky gut is typically associated with leaky liver
mm-hmm,
and leaky brain,
yep,
you
it's
know?
all
So
connected.
we're just, it's a storm. You
Yep.
said it best. It's a storm. And if you don't stop it,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to get better on its own,
Yep. And
right?
that's so important to even figure out if you have a leaky gut, because you could be eating all the right stuff, you could be taking your vitamins, and if you have a leaky gut, it's not completely getting through,
No.
unfortunately.
That's what I always look at when I look at food sensitivity tests. Parents, you don't want to make them feel bad, and I'm sure most of them are really trying their very best to feed their child a good diet. But if you are in a state where there's been, we're going to call it physiological trauma to your gut, then none of that good stuff is getting in.
Yep.
And so you have to go through a process of taking the gasoline off of the fire and allowing the belly to heal. And
Yes.
it will, but it
Yes.
does take a little bit of time. The gut, those cells turn over very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason you go through a process of elimination is because you're removing the gasoline. And so if we're talking about health down at a cellular level, it means that my cell is functioning at some percentage. Let's just say it's 65%. If you've got symptoms or labels, you're not functioning at 100%. Okay. So then, as the inflammation or the fire comes down, maybe the first time those cells turn over, maybe it just doesn't get worse. And then the next time it goes through that process, it says, hey, I'm a little stronger. You didn't pour gasoline on me this
Yeah.
month. And therefore, maybe I go up to 70%.
Yep.
And now we're getting the ball rolling and
Yep.
we're educating and we're showing this is not just about what you're going to do for a 90-day period.
Yep.
Hopefully, we are impressing upon you lifestyle changes.
Yep.
And if you really want things to change and last and not go back and forth and back and forth, it is a lifestyle.
Yes.
Do you feel like you've changed your lifestyle?
Yeah, especially after I'd say when I was like, I'm gonna eat healthy. I mean, when I go to my family's like, oh, Emily won't eat that, Emily won't eat that. And that's just been a year, like over the years, it's been a thing. And that's just because the research I've done with myself, and how much it can lead to and how much more it can lead to. And when you really start to change your lifestyle, you really start to see how much it affects you, and all the fatigue goes away. I mean, after 2 p.m., you're still okay. You're not like ready to crash, like just little things. But even now, I was almost diagnosed with endometriosis, but I was not wanting to or willing to get surgery to get fully diagnosed with it. And so, even though I was still eating healthy and I felt like I was still on a right track with my diet, I still catered towards my body because my body was in so much pain. I listened to my body and
Mm.
I went more of an anti inflammatory approach,
Hmm.
because that's what was happening. Pain means inflammation. So that was my number one thing. I was like, let me try an anti-inflammatory diet. And so one time Dr. Hansen was like, well, what do you do for it? I'm like, well, if I eat good, I'm not in pain. And so, and I take magnesium complex too, which is a godsend. But if I don't eat well, I mean, even if I eat like I don't even eat McDonald's. Like just something that's bad. Like if I eat gluten, like even like 4 times that month, I'm paying for it the
Wow.
end of the month.
Yeah.
And so it really just shows me how important it is for me, not only me, but my fiance too. He deals with his other issues with celiac, and he definitely cannot eat gluten whatsoever. And so there's even oils. I mean, one at one point in our lives, he was clean, like out of gluten, completely clean, but the oils and the preservatives that his parents
Mm.
were feeding him, they still made an impact on him. And then
Yeah.
we had, okay, no more vegetable oil, no more, I mean, all of that stuff is just so bad for your body, even though it's so accepted in society. It is so, so, so bad and so toxic to your body.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when we became a more industrialized society, we started making more things with cheaper products that went on for a very long time. And of course, the movement towards health is decades in the making. It is remarkable that there is still certain things on the grocery shelves when we really do know that they are quite dangerous to
Yes.
the body, you know?
Yes.
So, well, listen, thank you so much for being
Yeah.
with us. We hope that you all got some pearls about understanding trauma, kind of defining it, not limiting it to only very well accepted ideas of trauma, because even like Emily said, there's just this idea of like being an adult and going to school can be incredibly stressful, and chronic stress can make it a more traumatic situation, right?
And there's one more thing to add. So this article talks about you have the two most vulnerable states of your life, and that's childhood and young adolescence. So
Mm.
for Dr. Hansen's office, it really is so important to get your child in. If you see them struggling, if you think that they could benefit from her services, because that's what is considered a buffer is the caregiving area for the childhood part. Now,
Mm.
young adolescents, it's not a buffer. The caregiving is not considered a buffer. They do not see that as a buffer in their research. It doesn't show any change. But with the children, it's so important to help them now. And she does so much for these kids, and not just the therapy. She is there for the kids and the families emotionally, and she is there. She will be your number one shield if you need help. And I know there's so many adults and parents out there that are struggling with their kids, and so I just wanted to say, based on research, I mean, Dr. Hansen's office is a perfect place to go if there is struggle.
Well, thank you. That is very kind of you to say, and we just love having you here as well. You bring such an element of balance, and that's our team. That's our team approach, right?
Yep.
So, well, we hope you got some pearls, and be sure and share this podcast so that we can connect those dots and help people realize trauma, stress, struggles that people go through. It really does have a very far reaching effect. It affects that gut, it affects the brain, and affects all those different systems that are in your body and regulated in your brain. And when you go about it with a blueprint, a plan, and watch those changes happen, it is just the most magnificent thing to see health and wellness and brightness, and having that child really received as the most beautiful gift that they really are. So thank you for being with us, Emily.
Yes, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Remember, if you want to reach out, go to the website, connectmybrain.com. There is a contact us. We have added a area for you to tell me when you're available. And then if you want to call the office, it's 678 501 5172. As always, I'd like to say a great thank you to my podcast manager, Marcy Page. She is just wonderful. And Natasha, who handles all of the little changes that we make on our website. We are a team, we work together, and it's all about bringing the best information we can to our community and to the world. Be blessed.